I told you I could fix it. Incredible.
No mechanic could fix the billionaire's car. A poor pregnant woman did the impossible. If you were shocked by how Amara fixed the billionaire's car, hit that like button. Comment below, what would you have done in her place? Don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable, true-to-life stories that will leave you speechless. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over Lagos, Nigeria, painting the wide highway in shimmering waves of heat. Cars sped past in both directions, each driver desperate to escape the suffocating humidity. Street vendors lined the dusty sidewalks, balancing trays of roasted corn and chilled water sachets, shouting at passers-by in a bid to make a quick sale. The air was thick with honking horns, impatient engines, and the rhythmic beat of Afrobeat music blasting from taxis. And then it happened. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, polished like obsidian, suddenly jerked to a halt in the very middle of the highway. Its chrome grille, usually a symbol of power and wealth, now stood helpless, blocking the impatient flow of traffic. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Cars behind screeched to a stop, drivers leaned on their horns angrily, and bus conductors hung out of their doors yelling curses in Yoruba and Pidgin English. Inside the luxurious vehicle, Chinedu Okafor, a man in his early 40s, slammed his fist against the armrest. Chinedu wasn't just anyone, he was a billionaire industrialist, known across Nigeria for his ruthless business empire, sharp suits, and unshakable arrogance. Every newspaper had once called him the untouchable tycoon, a man who bent governments and corporations to his will. But today, stuck in the middle of the road, his power meant nothing. "Useless machine," Chinedu barked, tugging at his gold wristwatch as though blaming time itself. His driver nervously turned the ignition key again, but the car only groaned, coughing before dying with a hiss. From outside, angry voices rose. "Wetin dey worry una? Move this car now!" One bus driver shouted, waving his hands furiously. Another yelled, "Na big man we no sabi drive!" "Oga, clear road make we pass, Jor!" Chinedu's bodyguards quickly stepped out in their sharp black suits, raising their hands to calm the furious drivers. But the traffic only worsened. Within minutes, a long line of honking cars stretched down the Lagos highway, and the billionaire's broken-down Rolls-Royce became the center of attention. Chinedu leaned back in his leather seat, his jaw tightening. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was humiliation. For a man who thrived on control, the sight of ordinary people laughing at his misfortune burned like acid. "Call someone," he snapped. "Any mechanic in this city, bring them here immediately. I don't care what it costs." The driver pulled out his phone and began dialing frantically. Within minutes, word spread like wildfire. A billionaire's car has broken down on 3rd Mainland Bridge. Mechanics from nearby streets, eager for a chance to make money, rushed toward the scene. Some came carrying rusty toolboxes. Others simply ran, hoping to claim a miracle repair job. The crowd thickened. Street vendors abandoned their stalls, children peered curiously, and taxi drivers parked by the roadside just to witness the drama. Everyone wanted to see if anyone could fix the car that had brought Lagos traffic to its knees. Inside the Rolls-Royce, Chinedu adjusted his dark designer sunglasses, glaring through the tinted glass at the swelling crowd. His pride burned, but his voice remained cold. "Let's see if Lagos has anyone worthy of touching my car." As the first mechanic knelt by the hood, struggling to pry it open, the billionaire crossed his arms. He had no idea that this humiliating breakdown was only the beginning of a story that would shatter his arrogance, and that the one person who could truly fix his car wasn't among the sweaty mechanics swarming toward him now, but someone completely unexpected. Someone he would never have imagined. The heat rose like a furnace over the Lagos highway as the broken Rolls-Royce Phantom sat lifeless in the middle of the road, its polished body now nothing more than a monument to arrogance. Traffic had piled up behind it, the angry chorus of blaring horns echoing across the bridge. Street hawkers, sensing entertainment, lingered on the sidewalks, chewing roasted groundnuts while whispering about the billionaire trapped in his own machine. Soon, the first mechanic arrived. He was a wiry man in a faded Arsenal jersey, carrying a rusted toolbox that jingled with loose screws and battered spanners. Pushing past the crowd, he shouted confidently, "Clear road, I be expert. I go fix am sharp sharp." Chinedu's driver quickly ushered him to the hood. The billionaire, seated inside, peered out with a mixture of contempt and relief. The mechanic opened the bonnet, wiping sweat from his brow. He twisted a few bolts, adjusted the air filter, and shouted, "Oga, try am now!" The driver turned the key. The car groaned once, twice, then sputtered before falling silent again. The crowd laughed loudly, some slapping their knees. "Now, big car don't disgrace am. Mechanic way Sabina ghost, not this man." The mechanic scratched his head, muttered an excuse about the engine being too advanced, and backed away in shame. Chinedu clenched his jaw. "Next," he barked coldly. Moments later, another mechanic pushed forward, this one older, with grease-stained trousers and a spanner tucked behind his ear. His confidence was quieter, but his eyes sparkled with experience. "Don't worry, sir," he said, in Igbo-accented English. "This one nah small matter, I go handle am." He checked the battery, swapped a few cables, and even pulled out a brand new battery from his van. The crowd watched eagerly as he reattached the wires. "Try am now," he shouted. The driver twisted the ignition. This time the car gave a loud click, 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 then silence. Dead. Completely dead. The crowd roared with laughter again, louder than before. Vendors whistled, Danfo, yellow bus, drivers banged their horns rhythmically like it was music. See disgrace. Big man, money no fit by correct mechanic. Chinedu slammed the car door open and stepped out, his expensive Italian shoes clicking on the asphalt. His tall, broad figure radiated authority, but the sweat dripping down his forehead betrayed his anger. He pointed at the failed mechanic. "You get out of my sight." The man bowed his head and slipped into the crowd, humiliated. Within half an hour, a third mechanic arrived. He came recommended by someone in the crowd, a so-called specialist, known around Lagos for fixing exotic cars. He was confident, almost arrogant himself, strutting toward the car with a spotless red jumpsuit and shiny new tools. "Make way," he declared. "This one, nah nothing. I don't fix Ferrari, I don't fix Lamborghini. Rolls-Royce, no reach my level." The crowd oohed and awed, whispering that this might be the savior. Even Chinedu raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms as he watched the man open the hood. The mechanic carefully dismantled part of the engine, checking the ignition coils, tightening screws, and adjusting the fuel pump. He worked with precision, his tools clinking rhythmically. Sweat poured down his face, but he kept muttering to himself, "Almost there, almost there." Finally, he shut the hood, wiped his hands on a rag, and gave a triumphant nod. "Start am now." The driver twisted the key. Murm. Clunk! The car let out a strange cough, then with a loud bang. Smoke puffed from under the hood. The crowd gasped and then burst into uncontrollable laughter. "Ah, he done spoil pass before. Na mechanic abi magician. He want kill the car." The so-called specialist's face turned red with shame. He stammered excuses about needing specialized equipment and quickly packed his shiny tools before vanishing into the sea of mocking faces. By now, Chinedu's patience had snapped. His voice boomed across the road. "Is there no one in this entire city capable of fixing a simple car? I will pay anyone who succeeds double the amount they ask, but if you fail me again..." He didn't finish his threat. He didn't need to. His piercing glare was enough to silence even the noisiest bystanders. But as the crowd murmured, it became clear mechanic after mechanic had failed. The great billionaire, the man who prided himself on control, had been humbled in front of ordinary Lagosians. The Rolls-Royce remained dead. And unknown to him, the true solution was about to arrive not in the form of another mechanic, but in someone he would least expect. Someone the crowd would laugh at before she changed everything. The Lagos highway was now a theater of chaos. The billionaire's Rolls-Royce, once a shining symbol of wealth, sat lifeless like a stubborn beast that refused to move. Around it, the crowd had turned the breakdown into a spectacle. Children perched on concrete dividers, laughing with sticky fingers from half-eaten lollipops. Taxi drivers leaned against their dented yellow buses, trading jokes about how money no day buy sense. Even street hawkers had abandoned their trays to witness the humiliation of Nigeria's richest man. Chinedu Okafor stood beside his car like a king whose throne had crumbled. His broad shoulders were stiff, his gold wristwatch gleamed in the sun, but his face was flushed with rage. 3 mechanics had failed him already, each one scurrying away in shame. The billionaire's voice had grown colder, sharper, his reputation sinking with every failed attempt. "Fools," he muttered, adjusting his sunglasses. "This city is full of fools." The crowd buzzed with whispers. Some pitied the billionaire, most enjoyed his downfall. Then, as the heat shimmered on the asphalt, a rusty old public bus Malu creaked to a stop at the edge of the crowd. Its sides were painted in fading blue and yellow, plastered with stickers that read "God is able" and "Trust in Jesus." The bus hissed as the door swung open. From the doorway, a woman slowly stepped down. She was in her late 20s, her belly swollen with the weight of an 8-month pregnancy. She wore a faded green wrapper and a loose blouse, her slippers dusty from long travel. Sweat dampened her braided hair, and her face, though tired, carried a quiet strength. She clutched a small, worn-out bag, pressing one hand against her belly for balance. Her name was Amara. She had been traveling back to her village after visiting a local clinic, but the sight of the crowd and the stalled luxury car pulled her curiosity. She edged closer, standing at the fringe of the onlookers, her eyes narrowing as she studied the Rolls-Royce. The murmurs began immediately. "See that woman? She get bell, but she dey waka like mechanic. She no fit fix bicycle, she wan touch Rolls-Royce? Pregnant woman wan do wettin' trained men no fit do? Nah, comedy show be this?" The laughter spread like wildfire. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others jeered openly. But Amara ignored them. She had grown used to the sound of doubt. It had followed her all her life. Finally, she stepped forward, her voice soft yet steady. Maybe I can help." The crowd erupted. Some doubled over in laughter. Others clapped mockingly as if she had cracked the best joke of the day. "Pregnant mechanic," one man shouted. "Madam, a beg, go rest before you born for road," another sneered. Even Chinedu's bodyguards chuckled, exchanging looks of disbelief. But their laughter died quickly when the billionaire himself turned, his sunglasses reflecting the fragile figure of the woman who had dared to speak. He scanned her from head to toe, dusty slippers, worn-out clothes, bulging belly. His lips curled into a cruel half-smile. "You?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "A pregnant woman thinks she can fix what trained men failed to? This is not a sewing machine, this is a Rolls-Royce." The crowd roared with more laughter, encouraged by his words. But Amara didn't flinch. She stepped closer, placing her bag gently on the ground. Her hand pressed against her belly, steadying herself, but her gaze remained locked on the car. "I know what I'm saying," she replied quietly, her tone calm yet firm. "Sometimes it's not strength or tools, it's knowing where to look." For a moment, silence cut through the laughter. Something about her voice carried a weight that couldn't be mocked. Even the billionaire, despite himself, hesitated. The crowd, however, wasn't ready to believe. They jeered louder, some even shouting for her to step aside before she embarrassed herself. But Amara didn't move. She simply looked at Chinedu and said, "Give me one chance. If I fail, you lose nothing. If I succeed, your car moves, and this shame ends." Her words hung in the hot Lagos air. The billionaire folded his arms. Considering, pride told him to laugh her away. But desperation whispered otherwise. Every passing second dragged his name deeper into ridicule. He smirked finally, shaking his head. "Fine," he said coldly. "Entertain us. Show this crowd how a poor pregnant woman fixes a billionaire's car." The crowd erupted in cheers, whistles, and mocking applause. Some shouted bets that she wouldn't last a minute. Others pulled out their phones, ready to record the disaster they were sure was coming. But as Amara stepped toward the car, her hand brushing against the hot metal, her mind drifted briefly to memories of her late father, a humble roadside mechanic who had once taught her the secrets of engines. His voice echoed in her heart. Never be afraid of what others say. Machines don't listen to pride, they listen to patience. With a deep breath, Amara straightened her back, her belly pressing against her blouse as if reminding her of the little life inside. The crowd only saw a tired, fragile woman about to embarrass herself. But none of them knew that she was about to do the impossible. The crowd shifted, their laughter blending with the humid buzz of Lagos traffic. Phones were raised high, recording every second of the unfolding drama. For most, this was pure entertainment, nothing more than a poor, heavily pregnant woman about to embarrass herself in front of a billionaire. But Amara walked steadily toward the Rolls-Royce Phantom, her feet dragging slightly in the dust. She placed her worn-out bag on the ground and ran her hand across the glossy black bonnet. The car was hot to the touch, but she didn't flinch. Chinedu leaned against the door, his arms folded across his tailored suit. His lips curved into a smirk. "Well?" he said mockingly, "do you need me to call a midwife instead of a mechanic?" The crowd erupted in laughter again, but Amara ignored them. She bent forward and, with surprising steadiness, found the latch under the hood. With a firm tug, the bonnet popped open, revealing the car's mighty V12 engine, an intricate beast of wires, valves, and polished steel. The mechanics who had failed earlier had left behind smudges of grease and half-loosened bolts. It looked messy, chaotic. For the crowd, it was a nightmare of metal. For Amara, it was a language she had grown up hearing. Her late father's words whispered in her memory. "Engines breathe like people. Listen first before you touch. The sound will tell you the sickness." She leaned closer, inhaling the faint smell of fuel mixed with burnt oil. Her ears tuned into the faint ticking sound that came even though the engine was off. She spotted a small vibration near the fuel injection system, a loose connection no one else had noticed. Her fingers traced the line of the pipe, her eyes sharp despite the sweat dripping down her temple. "Driver," she called softly, "turn the ignition. Just once." The driver hesitated, glancing nervously at his boss. Chinedu waved his hand dismissively. "Do as she says. Let's all laugh properly." The key turned. The engine gave a dry cough, a hollow sputter, and died again. But to Amara, that sound was confirmation. She reached into her wrapper pocket and pulled out a tiny piece of cloth she carried for wiping sweat. With it, she carefully adjusted the loose fuel line, tightening the clamp with her bare fingers. She checked the ignition wire, noticing one had been poorly connected by the last mechanic. She pressed it firmly into place, using a small hairpin from her braided hair to keep it locked. The crowd watched in stunned silence. For the first time, the laughter died down. Phones zoomed in, capturing every delicate movement of the woman with a swollen belly, sweat running down her neck, as she worked with the calm precision of someone who belonged there. "Madam," one man from the crowd shouted nervously, "No, go shock yourself, oh." But Amara didn't respond. She was already lost in the rhythm of her father's teachings. Finally, she stepped back, wiping her oily hands on her wrapper. Her chest rose and fell heavily, but her eyes glistened with certainty. "Now," she said, her voice steady, "try again." The driver swallowed hard and twisted the key. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, vroom. The engine roared to life, deep and powerful, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The once dead phantom purred like a lion awakened from slumber. The crowd gasped in unison. Some screamed, others clapped, a few even dropped their phones in shock. "She did it!" someone shouted. "Nah, miracle be this!" another cried. The sound of the engine cut through the humid air, drowning out the mocking laughter that had filled the road minutes ago. Now, all that remained was awe. Chinedu straightened from where he leaned, his smirk vanishing. His sunglasses slid down slightly as his eyes widened at the sight before him. His Rolls-Royce, the untouchable symbol of his power, had been revived not by experts, not by men with shiny tools, but by a poor, exhausted pregnant woman who hadn't even asked for money. The billionaire's voice dropped to a whisper, almost to himself. Impossible. But it was real. His car was alive, its engine humming smoothly, mocking every so-called expert who had failed before. The crowd erupted into applause. Some clapped furiously, others whistled, and a few women ululated in celebration. Children danced in the dust, chanting, "Mama Mechanic! Mama Mechanic!" Amara, breathing heavily, stepped back from the car. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her hand instinctively pressing against her belly, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. Not of pride, but of relief that she had done it, that she had honored her father's teachings. Meanwhile, Chinedu stood frozen. For a man used to buying solutions with money, this was a wound to his ego and a revelation to his soul. He stared at Amara as though seeing her for the first time, not as a poor woman, not as a spectacle, but as someone who had achieved what no man in Lagos could. And deep inside, something shifted. The Rolls-Royce Phantom purred like a beast reborn, its powerful engine vibrating through the asphalt. The once rowdy Lagos highway had fallen into a stunned hush, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the car that no mechanic had been able to revive. The crowd, moments ago mocking, now erupted into cheers and applause. Children danced, hawkers clapped, and even hardened bus drivers whistled in awe. But at the center of it all stood Amara. Her blouse clung to her back with sweat, her hands bore streaks of grease, and her swollen belly strained against her wrapper. She pressed a palm against her side, breathing heavily, but her eyes remained steady, focused. It wasn't pride that shone there, it was quiet strength, the kind born not from wealth, but from survival. Chinedu Okafor removed his sunglasses slowly. For the first time that day, his expression was stripped of arrogance. His sharp jaw softened, his lips parted slightly, and his eyes, usually cold, calculating, were caught between disbelief and reluctant respect. The crowd began chanting, "Mama Mechanic! Mama Mechanic!" The nickname spread like wildfire, echoing across the bridge until even the vendors on the far side joined in. Amara shifted uneasily. She wasn't used to attention. Her life had always been lived in the shadows, between survival and sacrifice. She bent to pick up her worn-out bag, her hand trembling slightly. The movement caught Chinedu's eye, and for the first time, he noticed her fragility, the way her belly tilted her balance, the faint wince of pain that crossed her face when she stood upright. He stepped forward. His deep voice, usually commanding, softened. "Wait." The crowd fell silent instantly. Billionaire Okafor rarely spoke with gentleness. Amara turned slowly, unsure if he meant to mock her again. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. He held it out to her. "Take this," he said. "You've earned it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Everyone expected her to snatch the money gratefully. After all, she was poor, heavily pregnant, and visibly exhausted. For most, this was a fortune, a blessing. But Amara's lips pressed into a thin line. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said firmly, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I didn't do it for money." The crowd exploded in murmurs. Some laughed, thinking she was mad. Others stared at her in awe. Refusing money from Chinedu Okafor was unheard of. Chinedu's hand remained suspended in the air, the money rustling in the hot wind. His brows furrowed. "You don't want money? Then why?" Amara clutched her belly with one hand and lowered her gaze. For a moment, she seemed to wrestle with herself, but then the words spilled out. "My father was a mechanic," she began softly. "He fixed cars on a dusty roadside in Aba. People mocked him for being poor, but he had hands of gold. He taught me everything I know, how to listen to the heart of a machine, how to fix it when everyone else gave up. He died 5 years ago, collapsed while working under the hot sun because we couldn't afford medicine." The crowd grew quiet again, every word drawing them deeper into her story. Amara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Since then, I've struggled. I married young, but my husband left when he saw the weight of poverty. Now it's just me and this child." She placed her hand gently over her belly. "I came to Lagos hoping to find treatment, but the clinic said I need more tests. I don't even know if I can afford to bring this child into the world safely." Her voice cracked, but she straightened, lifting her chin with dignity. "That is why I fixed your car, sir. Not for money, but because if my father could see me today, he would want me to use what he taught me. Not to beg, not to bow, just to do what is right." The crowd stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. Some wiped their eyes, others shook their heads in disbelief at her strength. Chinedu's hand with the money slowly dropped to his side. He stared at her, his chest tight with emotions he had long buried. In his world of power and greed, people only moved when money moved them. But here was a woman, dirt poor, heavily pregnant, exhausted, and yet she had refused wealth, standing on nothing but her father's legacy and her own dignity. For the first time in years, something cracked inside the billionaire. He cleared his throat, his voice husky. "What is your name?" "Amara," she replied softly. Chinedu repeated it under his breath, as if trying to memorize it. Amara, a name that meant grace in Igbo. And indeed, she had shown him grace he didn't deserve. Behind them, the car engine still purred, alive and strong, a symbol of her impossible triumph. But to Chinedu, the greater miracle was standing before him, the woman who had just humbled his pride, not with power, not with wealth, but with truth. And as he looked at her trembling frame, he realized something else. If he let her walk away, he would never forgive himself. The Rolls-Royce Phantom continued to hum like a lion tamed, its deep growl filling the Lagos highway. Yet no one in the crowd paid attention to the luxury car anymore. Their eyes were locked on Amara, the exhausted, heavily pregnant woman who had done what the city's best mechanics could not. Chinedu Okafor stood motionless, staring at her as though the world around him had vanished. For a man who had built empires, crushed competitors, and lived by the rule of power and money, this moment was unlike anything he had known. The woman before him had shaken the very foundation of his pride. The crowd whispered in awe. "She no even take money. This kind woman, no day again. Not true hero be this-o." Amara adjusted her wrapper, her body trembling slightly. She was drained, the heat pressing against her swollen body, but she stood tall. Her father's voice echoed in her heart, steadying her. She bent to pick up her old bag, ready to disappear back into the shadows of Lagos as she always had. But then, stop. Thanks for watching and bitin together. Why? The billionaire's voice thundered, silencing the murmurs. Chinedu took a slow step forward, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. He no longer carried the cold arrogance of earlier. His face was stripped bare, vulnerable. "You said you don't want money," he said, his deep voice carrying across the crowd. "But what do you need?" Amara hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the ground. Finally, she whispered, "All I want is to bring my child safely into this world. That is enough for me." Her simple words struck him harder than any insult ever could. A billionaire with every luxury imaginable stood powerless before a woman whose only dream was survival. His chest tightened, and for the first time in years, his heart stirred with something unfamiliar: humility. He turned sharply to his guards. "Bring the car. We're going to St. Catherine's Hospital. Now." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chinedu Okafor, the ruthless tycoon, was offering a ride in his Rolls-Royce Phantom to a poor roadside woman. It was unthinkable. Amara shook her head quickly. "No, sir, I cannot enter your car. People will talk." Chinedu raised a hand. "Let them talk. Today they will talk about grace, not shame." The guards moved swiftly, clearing a path, but Chinedu himself stepped forward, holding out his hand to her. For a moment, Amara stared at it in disbelief. Then, slowly, she placed her trembling fingers into his palm. His grip was firm, steadying her as he guided her toward the back seat of the luxury car she had just resurrected. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and chanting her name. Children shouted, "Amara! Amara!" Taxi drivers honked in celebration instead of anger. Vendors ululated. What had begun as mockery had turned into a celebration of dignity and hope. Inside the car, Amara sank into the soft leather seat, her body finally allowing itself to relax. Tears pricked her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She whispered softly, as though to herself, "Papa, I hope you see me now." Chinedu sat opposite her, silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low, almost confessional. "All my life, I believed money was power. But today, you showed me that real power is not in wealth. It's in courage, dignity, and love." He paused, his gaze softening. "You didn't just fix my car, Amara. You fixed something far more broken, me." Her lips curved into a faint, tired smile. The Rolls-Royce purred forward, cutting through the traffic with ease as police escorts cleared the way. But for once, Chinedu didn't bask in the attention. His focus remained on the woman beside him, the woman who had redefined the meaning of strength. Hours later, at St. Catherine's Hospital, arrangements were made. Amara was admitted to the best ward, her expenses covered in full. Doctors and nurses treated her with care, not as another poor woman from the streets, but as someone precious. As she lay on the hospital bed, she heard the billionaire's voice one last time before drifting into rest. "Amara," he said, standing at her bedside. "From today, you are not alone. Your child will have every chance in this world, and not because I pity you, but because you taught me the value of life beyond riches. I owe you more than you will ever owe me." Her tired eyes glistened, and she whispered a single word before sleep claimed her. "Thank you." Outside the hospital, the same crowd that had mocked her earlier spread the story like wildfire. Social media exploded with videos of the pregnant mechanic who fixed a billionaire's car. But beyond the headlines and the fame, something far greater had happened. A proud man's heart had changed. A poor woman's dignity had been honored, and a child yet unborn had been given hope. As the night settled over Lagos, the sound of the Phantom's engine echoed one last time in memory, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder of a day when pride was broken and grace won.